All right, let's get right into it. We're heading back in time to the turn of the 20th century, deep into the heart of America's Gilded Age. Cities were just exploding, fortunes were being made left and right, and the country really saw itself as this shining beacon of progress. But that was just the surface, right? Beneath all that gold plating, a deep systemic rot was eating away at the very foundations of its democracy. And today, we are cutting right into that rot, guided by the sharp scalpel of one of America's greatest journalists, Lincoln Steffens, and his absolutely searing investigation, The Shame of the Cities. So Steffens doesn't ease us into this. He kicks things off with a punch straight to the gut. He takes the single most cherished idea of American identity, that the people are in charge, and he calls it a joke. So the big question of his work, and our whole explainer today, is just why? What on earth had he seen in the halls of power and the back alleys of big business that led him to a conclusion so cynical, so completely and utterly damning? To really get the answer, you gotta understand the man and his mission. Lincoln Steffens wasn't just trying to write some detached history book for the archives. No way. He was on the front lines, practicing a raw, aggressive, and deeply moral kind of journalism that would literally change the country. And look, Steffens was really clear about this. He didn't see his articles as some kind of academic study. He saw them as weapons. They were, in his own words, written with a purpose, and that purpose was to force a sleeping public to wake up, to smell the filth, and to get angry. This wasn't just observation, this was a full-on confrontation. This style of reporting was actually dubbed muckraking by President Teddy Roosevelt. And believe it or not, he meant it as an insult. But Steffens and his fellow journalists, they wore it like a badge of honor. Their job, as they saw it, was to rake through the filth, the muck, that the powerful were trying to hide, and to drag it out into the disinfecting light of day. And Steffens, well, he was the master of the craft. So let's see what he found when he started raking. Our investigation kicks off in St. Louis, a city that Steffens said was basically making two announcements to the world at the exact same time. First, that it was the most corrupt, most horribly misgoverned city in the entire United States. And second, that everyone on Earth should come for its magnificent 1904 World's Fair. I mean, the sheer shameless hypocrisy of it all, it's just staggering. And this is where you really see the sickness of it all. The city's elite would brag about their powerful banks, while regular citizens were drinking tap water the color of mud. They'd celebrate their industrial might, while the city hospital was a collapsing fire trap and the courthouse was literally overrun with vermin. This wasn't just neglect. No, this was theft, pure and simple. Every single unpaved street, every crumbling brick was the direct physical result of public money being systematically looted. So you might be wondering, how did this whole system of theft even work? Well, it was brutally, shockingly simple. If you were a businessman who needed a law passed, say a franchise for a new railway, you didn't hire a lobbyist. Oh no. You went directly to the city's political boss, a guy named Colonel Ed Butler, and you asked him for the price. This quote, that was his answer. Not some whisper in a back room, but a clear fee for service. Let's just pause on that number for a second. $145,000. Back in the early 1900s, this was an unimaginable fortune. We're talking millions and millions of dollars today. And this wasn't for some huge public works project. This was the cash price to buy a single lot from the city's elected officials. Corruption wasn't a secret scandal. It was an open market with a price list. And get this, it wasn't just some shady deal with cash stuffed in an envelope. As you see here, they had this sophisticated, almost business-like process they called boodle escrow. They actually professionalized graft. They'd take the bribe money, the boodle, and lock it in a bank vault that needed two keys to open, one for the guy paying the bribe and one for the crooked politicians. And the cash only got released after the law was passed. This wasn't just crime. It was a secure, reliable, you could almost call it a respectable financial transaction. Wild. But this perfect little machine of crime was about to get a wrench thrown in it by one guy, Circuit Attorney Joseph W. Folk. In a move of just breathtaking audacity, Folk didn't just issue subpoenas. He took the entire grand jury and marched them right into the lion's den, the bank itself. He led them down into the subcellar and demanded they open a private safe deposit box. This was completely unheard of. You just didn't do that. It was a violation of the sacred privacy of commerce. The bankers are freaking out, they're protesting, but Folk gives them 10 minutes to open the box before he comes back with axes. So they open the box, and there it was, $75,000 in cash, Not a rumor, not some allegation, but stacks of large banknotes. Cold, hard, undeniable proof of the city's soul being sold, just sitting right there in the vault. The fallout from Folk's investigation was just immense. But honestly, there's this one little story, this darkly comic anecdote that tells you everything you need to know about just how rotten the culture had become. A corrupt lawmaker gave his bribe money to his son to hide. When he went to get it back, the boy refused. His reasoning is just incredible. My mother says it's stolen money, so it would be wrong to give it back to you. So I'll just keep the stolen money for myself. The moral rot was so complete, it had become a twisted kind of family value. It's insane. So, after blowing the lid off St. Louis, Steffens heads over to Minneapolis. And what he discovers there is, well, it's deeply chilling. The corruption was just as total, but the method was completely different. And it proved that this wasn't just some local problem in one city. This was a national disease that could mutate, adapting itself perfectly to the character of whatever city it infected. And the contrast here, this is what's so eye-opening. St. Louis was a cold, hard business run by a bipartisan combine of politicians who sold laws like any other product. Minneapolis? That was a personality cult. The entire citywide system of police-protected crime, we're talking gambling, liquor, prostitution, the whole shebang, was run by one man, the charming, generous, and universally beloved Mayor Doc Ames. Under Mayor Ames, the city's criminal world was organized with terrifying precision. If you ran an illegal saloon or a brothel, you couldn't just go buy your beer or furniture from anyone. No, you were forced to buy it at crazy high prices from the official supplier, who just happened to be handpicked by the mayor's brother. Every single part of the vice economy was a controlled monopoly, all of it designed to funnel cash directly into the mayor's pockets. And if you think that's bad, it gets so much worse. This wasn't just about taking a cut from Vice. The police themselves became the #1 criminal gang in the city. Steffens uncovered case after case where police captains, the highest-ranking officers, planned major burglaries. They recruited the thieves, gave them the blueprints, and then literally stood guard outside while their crew looted the place. I mean, can you even wrap your head around that? The very people sworn to protect and serve were actively orchestrating the plunder? So as Steffens is connecting the dots from St. Louis to Minneapolis to Pittsburgh, he starts to form a bigger theory. The problem wasn't just a few bad apples, a corrupt mayor here or a crooked council there. No, the rot went way deeper, linking the city halls and the police stations directly to the boardrooms of legitimate American business. And this right here is the justification, straight from a politician's mouth. It's laid out with this kind of brutal, market-based honesty. He sees himself as no different than the merchant. If the so-called respectable businessman is willing to pay for a political favor, a convenience, then who is he, a guy just trying to make a living, to say no? In his mind, he's not the source of the crime. He's simply a supplier meeting a market demand. And that right there, that was it. This was Steffens' grand, unified theory of American corruption. Just 4 simple words. Politics is business. Not that business interests had influenced politics, but that politics had stopped being about governance and had transformed into a business. Its goal was profit. Its products were laws. And its customers were just the highest bidders. Public service? It wasn't even part of the equation anymore. But Steffens, he doesn't stop with the politicians and the businessmen. He's not done. In his final and maybe his most devastating analysis, he turns the lens away from the perpetrators and points it directly at the public, straight at the American people themselves. This image he paints is it's absolutely gut-wrenching. Steffens saw with burning clarity how patriotism was being used as the ultimate distraction. The corrupt politicians would wrap themselves in the flag, give these fiery speeches about liberty, and get the crowds roaring with pride. And while all the good citizens were distracted, waving their flags and shouting, the politicians were quietly stealing the city hall right out from under them. And this is his final, furious verdict. The ultimate source of the shame, the true engine of corruption, wasn't the petty bribe takers in government. It was the so-called better citizens. The bankers, the railroad magnates, the corporate leaders. They were the ones who wanted the special treatment, the rigged contracts, the toothless regulations. The politicians were just the suppliers in a market created by the respectable elite. The shame, it belonged to everyone. And so, this is where Steffens leaves us, right here, with this question. He called it the most humiliating challenge from one man to a great people. After dragging this entire corrupt system into the light, from the bank vaults to the boardrooms, he turns to the reader, he turns to us, and asks a question that echoes with just as much urgency and anger today as it did back in 1904. What are you going to do about it?